It's the end of the year again. What? I feel like this year has just flown by. At least for me, it has been quite a wild ride. So it's that time of the year when many of us start to think back on what happened this year, what we did, what we accomplished, what we didn't accomplish, what our plans are here moving forward. And if you follow me, I'm guessing that learning or improving your Spanish is one of your goals. You would like to include that as part of your plan. Now, disclaimer here, while I definitely do not believe in waiting until a new year to start a new goal, and I certainly think that we need to be doing this kind of self-analysis and planning several times a year and really congratulating ourselves for everything that we've been able to accomplish, you have to admit that there's something just kind of fun and exciting about having a brand new year to look forward to. But what if you're not excited about your plans, at least as far as your Spanish is concerned? Maybe what you've been doing so far just seems really boring or just really hard, just an uphill battle, and nothing's really coming naturally or sticking in the way that you had hoped. Well, if you're feeling that way, there may be one or more of the following 3 items that we're going to discuss today in this video that you may be omitting from your routine or not including enough of. And as basic as these things are, if you can identify what the problem is, I can pretty much guarantee you that 12 months from now, no, actually a lot sooner, you're going to be blown away by your own Spanish progress. Let's talk about it. What's up, language leaders? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Erica, Spanish coach, teacher, and storyteller, and I am here to help Spanish learners go from frustrated, bored, and overwhelmed to really organized, clear, and confident with their Spanish routine while having as much fun as possible along the way so that they can finally stick with it and accomplish those purposeful and meaningful conversations that they so desire. If that is your desire, then definitely stick around by hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell. All right, guys, so I want to make sure that you're including these 3 elements in your routine and taking full advantage of them so that you're not making learning Spanish harder than it needs to be. But back up a second. If you're sitting there right now thinking, what routine? Erica, I don't even have a routine. I have no kind of learning Spanish plan. Well, that is okay. Why not take about 30 seconds right now to go grab your free copy of my Spanish Fluency Blueprint. This is a simple PDF, simple to read, easy to implement. Literally thousands and thousands of you have already taken advantage of it. So if you didn't know that a PDF could change the game for you, you probably haven't gotten your copy yet. So go ahead and head over to ericareallanguage.com/blueprint or click on the link up here or down here in order to grab your copy. All right, if learning Spanish has just seemed very hard for you lately, it may be that you're not doing one of these 3 things. So you're not using comprehensible input, or perhaps your input is out of context or not very engaging, or you're not spending enough time with the input. So let's talk about each of these one by one. So maybe you're not using comprehensible input. What is comprehensible input? Well, when you can understand the meaning of what you are listening to or what you are reading, even if you can't understand everything. In fact, you shouldn't understand everything if it's at the comprehensible input level, but you do understand the overall meaning. That's what we call comprehensible input. It is very important to be able to understand the overall meaning of what you're reading or what you're hearing in order to start to acquire the new items within it that you don't know yet. So let's look at an example sentence. This says, "Levántate de la cama, Juanito, que ya se hace tarde." So let's say that you look at this sentence and you recognize this as coming from the verb levantar, to get up. You're not sure what the te is doing here, kind of stuck there at the end, but you get that someone is getting up from these are pretty common words, bed, cama, Juanito. So you're like, okay, so Juanito is getting out of bed, que ya se hace tarde. Okay, maybe you're not sure why the que is here, why the ya is here. They may seem kind of out of place. And perhaps the se hace tarde, you're not sure why those words are put together like that, but you do understand tarde. And so you put together that this sentence is saying, get up out of bed, Juanito. It's getting late. So even though you're not sure about everything about all of the structure, you do understand the meaning. So this is an example of what comprehensible input is, what it could look like for you. And before we move on, drop me a comment to let me know, does this make sense? Does the definition of what comprehensible input is make sense? If it does, tell me entiendo here in the comments below. If it doesn't, tell me no entiendo so that I'll know to elaborate on that in future videos. All right, let's move on. All right, so you may say, well, I think I'm good with that. My textbook or my course has lots of example sentences and I can follow along with them. I really understand them all. That is perfect. But maybe you're having an issue here with number 2. So your input may be out of context or not very engaging. You can learn sentence structure, you can learn the concepts of different grammatical points, how sentences are put together from really any sentence that contains that particular structure. But using that approach exclusively is usually just too boring, honestly, to stick with. Or it would take a lot of sentences, a mass amount of sentences to get the job done for you to be able to translate that grammar into something that you can use. And if you're going to use a mass amount of sentences, you may as well be using a full context that is interesting and engaging for you so that you can actually stick with your Spanish program and look forward to it. So I want you to remember that random sentences are perfect for illustrating a concept, but they're not perfect for engaging you enough to stick with your Spanish routine. And for many of you, sticking with your program is the biggest hurdle that you actually face. Now, the third problem could be that you're not spending enough time with the input and or not making use of repetition, we could add. Now, one of the easiest ways to spend enough time with your input and make use of repetition is by simply reading the same thing multiple times, listening to the same thing multiple times. So you could read your story multiple times, listen to that podcast a few different times, etc. Why does listening and reading the same thing a few times help? Well, it's because you're going to be exposed to the sentence structure of the same sentences multiple times. For example, if you read this, levántate de la cama, Juanito, que ya se hace tarde. Well, just reading that one time isn't actually going to be enough for the sentence structure, the elements that you're unsure about, to start to stick with you without you taking the time to go and do the hard work of looking up what is with this te on the end and what is with this que here and all of the things that you don't understand, which takes a long time and just kind of gets boring and takes you away from the Spanish. It just takes you away from that natural exposure when you take so much time to go look up everything. Trust me that if you continue to read and listen, some things start to become clear to you even without an explicit explanation. So if you read this again, you may kind of start to assimilate that this que, really it's kind of a substitute for por qué, right? Because we could say, get up from the bed, Juanito, because it's getting late, right? But for some reason, we don't even have the por here. We just have the que. So, okay, that's interesting. You may start to just kind of file that away. And then you come across another context, okay? Perhaps in that same story, or perhaps in a completely different environment. Maybe you're watching a movie, watching the news, and someone says, presta atención que te están hablando. Pay attention. Que, again, that's weird. They're speaking to you. Someone's speaking to you. Okay, I have that que. So I'm kind of starting to understand that, yeah, I mean, this is kind of substituting por qué. Presta atención porque te están hablando, right? Pay attention because they're speaking to you. So without ever having to look up and have a grammar explanation confirm for you that yes, in certain subordinate clauses like this, the que can kind of stand in for por qué. There's usually a comma before it, etc., etc. This is something that you just kind of start to pick up and you start speaking like that. You don't know why. If you see this sentence a week later after you read the Juanito story, you probably aren't actually going to say, I just heard a sentence that is structured in a similar way to the story that I read last week. You probably won't think that much, but you just start to pick it up. This is what just picking it up means. You know, people say, how do you just pick up a language? This is how you just pick it up. You expose yourself enough to it so that these patterns, even though they seem strange at first and you weren't sure about it at first, they start to just become natural. And you don't need anyone to explain that to you. This is just one of millions of examples of how input in a context that makes sense so that you can get that meaning, and having enough of it helps you to just pick up the language. So at that point, you just get lost in what you're reading, what you're listening to. You get lost in the story, and the sentence structure, the grammar is something that falls into place. That doesn't mean that you're never going to have an explanation, because you certainly can. And they can actually help you just quickly confirm these things that you think you know. But as we mentioned in a recent video, be careful with how much time you're spending there. Not only because it's not the fastest way to learn Spanish through a lot of grammar, but also because it's just not fun for most people to spend most of their time there. It can seem easier because it's pretty easy to pick up on a concept like what I just explained to you, but the way that you're actually going to start to use it is going to be through a lot of exposure and practice. For some reason, I don't know why, when the que is here in this kind of sentence structure in Spanish, it kind of reminds me of the old English word for, like pay attention for they are speaking to you. It doesn't sound weird or old-fashioned like that in Spanish, but I don't know. I guess maybe my brain made that connection at whatever point in history that I just kind of picked up on this type of sentence structure. So your individual brain will make connections like that. I can't even predict what kind of connections will come up for you as you are exposing yourself to Spanish, but it will happen if you give yourself enough time. And you may be wondering how much time is enough time with the comprehensible input? This can vary wildly from person to person. So I usually say we'll start with 30 minutes a day of exposure to Spanish, make sure it's comprehensible input, make sure it's in a context, and go from there and just see how you feel. The interesting thing is that when you are doing all three of these things, well, your comprehension increases. And when your comprehension increases, you naturally start to spend more of your day in Spanish. You'll seek out conversations with people that you want to speak with. You will have more enjoyable, longer conversations with your friends, with your tutor. You'll read longer stories. You'll listen to longer podcasts and get more out of them. So the more often that you do these three things, the more you will find yourself naturally spending more of your day with Spanish, even substituting things that you used to do in English for Spanish. You may substitute that English podcast that you usually listen to during your commute with a Spanish one and enjoy it. And it'll become just really natural to spend more time in Spanish the more that you really do put these things into practice. So eventually the numbers won't be relevant at all. So try to get past that. Just do it. See how you feel. And then I guarantee that you're just going to spend more of your life in Spanish, which is going to accelerate your progress even more. It's just a snowball effect. And that is why I know that when we're having this conversation next year, you're going to be so much further advanced than where you are now. So now we've gone over these three super simple but really important aspects that you have to include in your routine. Leave me a comment below to let me know which one you feel like you can still work on. Okay, you'll have some accountability there by even if you just leave me a number. Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? So is it you're not using comprehensible input? Number 1. Is it your input is out of context or not very engaging? Number 2. Or is it that you're not spending enough time with the input or not repeating it very often? That would be number 3. So leave me a 1, a 2, a 3, a 1, 2, and 3, or whatever combination is true for your particular circumstance. And then just have that one goal. going here into the new year to fix that one thing, you're not going to overwhelm yourself that way, and you're going to see what a difference it makes. Again, make sure to go grab my Spanish Fluency Blueprint so that you are set up with a plan for the new year coming. I hope that has been helpful for you guys. If so, be sure to give me a like. Let me know any follow-up questions that you have, because I will certainly do videos on those topics as well. I'll see you in the next one, but don't forget to go out and live your new language today. See you next year. Bye-bye.